Good morning. My name is Chuck Dunlap. I'm Executive Director of the Indiana Bar Foundation, and I am here in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm also an adjunct professor at Indiana University and teach an intro to law and public policy class there. Looking forward to hearing from you today.
Good morning, Rhode Island. My name is Johnston. I am joining you from New York City, my little studio apartment. My day job is an in-house attorney at Peloton Interactive, selling bikes to everybody that's stuck at home. And back when I was in high school, I was in Indiana, and I was a We the People participant as well. So congratulations on making it to nationals. Thank you for being here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
And now if you could introduce yourselves and introduce your teacher to us.
Hi, I'm Brennan Drolet.
Hi, I'm Daniel White.
I'm Erica Gonzalez.
And I'm Gabe Carbo, and we're all freshman members of Miss OBrien's We the People class.
Great. So I'm going to read the question, even though we all know what it is, but just to make sure we're all on the same page. So this is Unit 5, and the question is number 2. Richard Posner wrote that the American public worries more about invasions of privacy than about summary proceedings against suspected terrorists, curtailment of the freedom of speech of the law-abiding, or the right of the media to publish government secrets. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? Why or why not? To what extent, if any, is privacy in jeopardy today? What protection, if any, do people have from privacy violations by governments or businesses? And you can start whenever you're ready.
When the Bill of Rights was ratified, there were a few amendments that protected the right to be left alone. Over the course of American history, the meaning of privacy has been altered drastically. In 1604, Edward Coke created the common law phrase, quote, "A man's house is his castle," end quote, which implied the right of privacy was to be secure in one's home, safe from the powers of government. When America became more industrialized, the wealth expanded and there was more physical separation within households, which created more opportunity to be left alone. With increases in technology since then, the right of privacy is needed more and more to protect our fundamental liberties.
Eventually, in Griswold v. Connecticut, the Supreme Court found marital privacy under the Constitution. Overall, the Supreme Court has done well in interpreting the right of privacy with newer technology. For example, the court held in U.S. v. Jones that the installation of a GPS tracking device on Jones' vehicle without a warrant constituted an unlawful search under the Fourth Amendment. Similarly, in Kylo v. U.S., it was ruled that using a thermal imaging device to explore details of a home that would previously have been unknowable without physical intrusion is a search and is presumed unreasonable without a warrant.
Ooh, Brennan, we're not hearing you at all.
Okay.
Does
this help?
Go.
Okay.
Yep, that helps.
After many landmark cases like these, Americans have become accustomed to the right of privacy more and more within their daily lives. Studies relating to public opinion also demonstrate how much the public values their data privacy. In a study conducted by PewResearch.org, they found that 76% of adults think that the risks outweigh the benefits that they might get from government data collection. Similarly, InTouch International found that 9 in 10 American internet users say they are concerned about the privacy and security of their personal information online, and 67% are now advocating for strict national privacy laws. Americans clearly value their right to privacy heavily, even if it may be at the expense of their safety. Therefore, Richard Posner's statements regarding the American public are correct.
With advancements in technology being so key to modern day society, threats to privacy will continue to grow. Today, all sorts of information can be valuable for businesses and the government. For example, with DNA, insurance companies could set individual rates or deny coverage to someone who's vulnerable to costly diseases. Also, an increasing amount of devices are being created that collect information about individuals who own them. There are virtual assistant devices created by Amazon and Google that listen in on all conversations, including private ones.
The Supreme Court has taken a step in the right direction with their ruling in Carpenter v. U.S. They ruled that the government's warrantless acquisition of cell site records violated the searches and seizures of the Fourth Amendment and chose not to extend the third-party doctrine to cell site location information. The court is questioning whether or not the third-party doctrine, which was created in the 70s, should be used to define what information is or isn't private when involving modern technology.
States can also be a threat to privacy. Many states, including Ohio, Alabama, and Louisiana, are making laws and regulations that limits a woman's right to get an abortion. Supreme Court recently heard a case, June Medical Service v. Russo, where they will interpret a law that requires physicians who perform an abortion to have active admitting privileges to a local hospital. With the lack of data protection laws and limits on a woman's personal privacy, this fundamental right is in jeopardy.
Data privacy is currently protected by a small collection of federal and state laws that assist in keeping data on the internet. The Privacy Act of 1974 is one of them. It establishes a code of fair information practices that govern the collection, maintenance, use, and dissemination of information about individuals that is maintained in systems of records by federal agencies. Similarly, the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act requires financial institutions to explain how they share and protect their customers' private information. Many U.S. states, including California, are now trying to create data privacy laws that provide residents the knowledge of what data is being collected and allows them to say no to the sale of their personal data. Although there are some gaps within privacy currently, the U.S. government has done a good job historically making sure that privacy is protected.
And that is time. So thank you very much. So let me remind you to put your notes away, and we've got a few questions for you. So let me start out by asking you, do you believe that the greatest risk to personal privacy today comes from the government or from private entities, private companies, for example?
I feel like the bigger risk comes from private companies because they can collect all of our data when we confirm using cookies on our websites, and we don't know exactly what data there is. And with the lack of protection from law, we have a hard time regulating what is private and not private.
I agree with my friend and colleague Dan. Mark Zuckerberg said in court that most people who sign off on Facebook and Instagram websites don't actually know what they're signing off on and don't often even read it, and which is a major violation to some people or rights because they don't even know and they don't even read it. So I totally agree with that with Dan's statement.
But shouldn't we expect adults to read contracts before they enter into them?
I think that, yeah, the adults should expect to read off of the listed guidelines that are set by private companies, but often in basic citizens don't even read them because they don't see them as important. And often I think that that's some of the private companies' fault because they just set it out there. They don't really enforce it, and they don't say, oh, you have to sign this off, or you have to read it detailed. People just click and say, okay, submit, and don't really think about it, put it in the back of their head.
So I wanted to talk about this in the current context of the COVID-19 crisis and the idea of contact tracing and government trying to curb some of these health and safety issues and deal with them through potential privacy concerns with contact tracing and tracking movements in order to determine and try to deal with the outbreak. How should courts deal with the balance between the public safety aspect of government versus the individual privacy rights? And do you think are there previous precedents and things that the court can use to sort of look and analyze during this situation?
Personally, I think that public safety should take the priority, and I think that the government's number one job is to protect the public and make sure they're safe, and that's what laws are designed to do. But I do understand that people's individual liberties are being violated, but I say that the court should give them more lenience because it's a national emergency.
For example, in Terry v. Ohio, a policeman stopped Terry and two others and frisked them, and he found a concealed firearm on Terry, and as a result, Terry was sent to prison. And this really shows that privacy is not as important as the safety of the public, because we have no idea what Terry would have done.
So what happens when you give the government this power during a particular crisis in order to react to? Does the government give it back and say, okay, the crisis has passed, we're no longer going to do these things that we could do before? Do you think that that's what happens, or is there a danger there?
I think that no matter what, our rights are still there because the Constitution is still standing. But I think it's just more important that everyone is safe than everyone's individual liberties.
I disagree with Dan. I think that the COVID-19 limitations have hit a major blow to civil rights listed in local and federal government guidelines, such as limiting what we can wear, where we can go, and where we may gather. This can be seen in two men. An example, this can be seen in two men being forced out of a pond, in a pond with no one in sight, just paddle boating and surfing in Minnesota, resulting in them possibly thrown in jail for 6 months with a $1,000 fine. Also, another example is an Easter Sunday. People would gather in a parking lot, and they were forced out by the New Jersey police. And I think this is a major, major violation to our First, Fourth, and Ninth Amendment rights, according to Blackman, Justice Blackman, and the right to your own body. And I think this will be a huge disagreement for the founders and what the states and the national government is doing. But due to this current circumstances has led the country to believe otherwise.
So have you, since you've been studying this and becoming more sensitive to these privacy issues, do you read the consents, that button you got to push saying, I agree? Have you been paying closer attention to the things that you're being told by the companies in terms of how they're going to use your data?
To be 100% honest with you, I haven't really downloaded any apps since we learned about this, but I do know that in the future I will look at it, and I think it's important that people understand what they're actually signing up for. And I do get that why the policies are there, so that citizens have an understanding and they can confirm whether or not they want their privacy to be violated. But if you look at the statistics, most people do not read them, and I think that's an issue. I think it should be more straightforward, straight to the point, so that people have a better understanding. And that's why I think that we need more data privacy laws.
Thank you very much. That is time, and that is a really great job. So thank you. It's first of all, so you're all freshmen. So you're all in 9th grade?
Yep.
Wow, it's hard for me to believe based on that presentation. I don't think when I was in 9th grade, I could have done anything remotely like this. So for congratulations, we've seen the other teams we've seen yesterday and so far today. I think they were all upper class people, 11th, and many of them were seniors. And I don't think if I didn't, know, because I had been told that you were freshmen, that I would have seen like a difference like that. I think you guys have done a fantastic job. You obviously, you understand the material. You did a very nice job of laying out sort of the background of starting with the Koch quote, "Man's home is castle," from 1604 was a very sort of historically informed way to get into this. I don't think we've heard that from a team yet, but I think it was a very sort of applicable quote. I mean, I think it was a perfect way to begin. And I will just end by saying these are really difficult questions, and it's really, you guys really sort of brought a very thoughtful and I thought informed approach to it. And so I really encourage you to just sort of stay on top of this, Daniel, like when you said in the future, you're gonna be paying more attention to these things. And I would really just encourage you, this is your world, and this world's gonna be what you make of it. So thank you so much for your presentation this morning.
Yeah, I agree. You did a great job. And again, I know the whole freshman thing, but you have an opportunity that a lot of others don't. You still have the rest of your high school career. which hopefully will be much more in person in the future than virtual. This past semester, I'm sure, has been a challenge for you and your teacher, I suspect. But you have a lot to look forward to, and you have a jump start on some of these concepts that people, frankly, a lot of people a lot older than you don't have that depth of knowledge that you do. And so that's an amazing thing and an amazing opportunity that you have to be able to continue to explore it and to continue to dig into it, which is obviously what you've been doing this past semester, and it really showed. I think the idea of a couple things from your opening I thought were really good too. Privacy, is evolving, but privacy is in so many different concepts. It's healthcare. It's and you mentioned financial institutions. It's tax returns by people that don't want to give them up and things like that. You don't want everybody to see your business, what's going on. It used to be back in the founders' time that was much more limited, right? And you had documents and things like that, which was personal papers and effects. Well, that's a lot of things now, and it's a lot easier to transmit, and it's a lot easier to compile. And so how do we respond to that? You did a nice job of talking about that and the challenges, frankly, that are there. And the DNA and all of these things are driven by technology. And so I think you had a really good grasp of that, that concept and those ideas, and I really enjoyed talking with you this morning.
Yeah, I'll echo my fellow judges. I thought that was really, really impressive, and wouldn't have known you were freshmen. So congratulations. That must have been a lot of hard work going into that, and it showed. I liked how you really took the question and formed kind of an opinion around it. There were several times when you all were taking a position on the prompts, and not every school kind of hits that on the head. And it's interesting for us to hear where you stand. It also makes the follow-up more interesting because we can pick up on things that you've said in your statement and push on them a little bit. Which is what I did. And to echo what Chuck was saying about, you guys having a head start on these very real issues, my whole job is thinking about how this interacts with my company's customers and what they're reading in our terms of service and privacy policy, and what's okay and not okay for us to do with their data. So you all are so much more plugged in on social media and everything than the folks who are making the laws today. So you're just kind of ahead of it, right? And I would encourage you to stay engaged and keep thinking about this stuff, because by the time you all can get to be lawmakers and judges, or who knows what we're going to be, what kind of environment we're going to be in with respect to privacy. So thank you for all the hard work. It was a great discussion.
Yeah, thank you to your Ms. O'Brien. Thank you for such a wonderful group. And please, we don't get a chance to be with your parents as we would if you were here in person. So please extend to the parents our thanks for all they've done to make this a reality. Bye-bye, everyone. Stay safe.